Welcome to Muse Capital's inaugural episode in our mini-series on the future of how we care. Delve into the landscape of women's health through the lens of visionary founders shaping the future of healthcare, presented not just as venture capitalists, but as women deeply involved in the industry with our own personal journeys. We're kicking the series off by flipping the script to put ourselves in the hot seat so you can get a good sense of who we are and what we're passionate about. We've invited Halle Tecco, renowned investor, founder, and podcaster in women's health, to interview us. Halle is an absolute badass, with a bunch of accolades including Forbes 30 Under 30, Business Insider 30 Under 40, SF Business Times 40 Under 40, an MBA and MPH with degrees from Case Western, Harvard Business School, and Johns Hopkins. She's an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School, a former founder and CEO, the host of the Heart of Healthcare podcast, which is awesome, and a good friend who has been investing in the future of healthcare since 2011. Halle, thank you so much for joining us today, for agreeing to come on and interview us for this inaugural episode of our mini podcast series. And we admire you so much. So really, thank you so much for taking the time and doing this today with us.
Today, I am the one that gets to interview you guys. It is such a pleasure to be here and help listeners out there get to know both of you a little better. I'm so impressed with the portfolio that you guys have built in the women's health space, and I'm thrilled to support. I've followed your journey ever since we met through Co-Fertility, where you guys are investors. And you guys have so much to share with the world. So excited to be here.
That was a fateful event when we met you through Co-Fertility. So we're very grateful to that. How many years ago was that now? 2 years?
Two. Yeah. So I guess before we get into the nitty-gritty details of companies in the women's health space, I would love to have you guys share a little bit more about your backgrounds, how Muse came to be, and everything that you guys have done to date. So how did you two meet? What is your love story?
I love how you put that. It is a love story. She is my work wife.
Oh boy.
You want to kick it off?
Sure. So it was a fateful day 10 years ago, actually, that I met Assia.
We had both just moved from Europe to the US. I had moved from Stockholm to LA for Spotify to launch their LA office.
And I was working with a technology company that I wanted Spotify to either partner or acquire. And actually, Assia was the person I pitched to.
Not only did she pitch me like the superstar that she is, and it was clear as day that this was the right thing, but I also knew she was going to make me look particularly good to the business and to everybody else. So I literally said, this is amazing. You're going to make me look so good. And who the hell are you? I was wowed by this woman. And then we spent a year negotiating the deal together, a whole full year. You get to know each other really well when you're negotiating.
Wow.
So our friendship started as a business relationship.
Yeah.
And, you meet thousands of people in your life through these random meetings. But I think that moment when you and I met, I think we figured out that there was something special that was about to happen.
What an awesome story, and what a great lesson for all the listeners. You might be on another side of the table from someone now, but you don't know who that person could be your co-founder later on. So you want to always treat people with so much respect. And even though you're negotiating, with each other, you built respect and a friendship through that. So that's so cool. So how did you go from that deal to starting Muse Capital?
When we announced the deal between the two companies, I was actually with my client in a nightclub in Ibiza celebrating the deal. And I got a phone call, I think it was 2 a.m, from Assia. And I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, I have some bad news. I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember just being so shocked by it that I kind of stopped everything I was doing and I got on a plane and I came back and was actually with her through that whole diagnosis. And she had to go from being diagnosed to having a full double mastectomy.
And Rachel would come practically every day to my house and not only cook me incredible Philippine food, which I still contribute very much towards my recovery, but also I attribute my recovery to her friendship. And it was during that time every day that we would talk about our future, our legacy, what the future was going to hold for us.
And I think at this point, we realized that we'd spent our entire careers making a lot of money for other people. And we said to ourselves, what is it that we can do that would be our legacy? And that's when the idea came about for Muse Capital.
Wow. Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. We all know that Muse focuses in consumer tech in the buckets of the future of how we care, play, and live. What does that mean to you? And how do you think about the world through those three lenses?
In our care bucket, we have invested, very proud to have invested in the entire women's health journey. Everything from egg freezing and donation to telehealth for postpartum services to 360-degree clinics for women over 40 to reimagining pediatric care. But we also look at things like the future of childcare, which again is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity that has traditionally been underfunded.
And within the play bucket, if you think about gaming, for example, 48% of gaming enthusiasts are women. But there is literally nothing out there for us. Gaming studios are typically making games for men, for boys.
Another example of a real overlooked opportunity is in the area of women's sports. And this all to my co-founder, because 10 years ago when we met, she was telling me that women's sport was going to be huge, and I didn't really get it. And roll forward, women's soccer is definitely the hottest thing that's out there. And so, we invested in a company called Just Women's Sport that's trying to be the future ESPN for the category.
Yeah.
And so that's another example of a play opportunity.
Yeah.
And then in the live bucket, this is where we are playing into longer term consumer trends like wellness and sustainability, trends that, are only becoming more important to the consumer. A good example of that is a company called Beekeepers Naturals that we backed very early. Her vision was to disrupt the entire modern medicine cabinet, or to create the modern medicine cabinet. So think a replacement for Dayquil, NyQuil, Benadryl, just better for you products for, ourselves and our families. And
which Assia sent me when I was sick a few months ago. Now I'm hooked.
I think I sent you every single product on the market. She sent me a picture going, wait, am I supposed to be taking all of this?
All of it.
We're looking at the consumer over the next 10 years between play, care, and live. We think that these are, sectors that are undergoing massive, massive change, massive opportunity. And it's not new for us, right? Women's health is something that everyone seems to be more aware of now, but we've been, betting in that space and investing in it for close to a decade at this point.
Yeah. And you guys invest at the riskiest stage of a startup's life, which is the early stage. Why did you choose to focus on early stage ventures?
We love early stage. Pre-seed and seed is really where is our sweet spot. And there are multiple reasons why we like going in early. First of all, we have a track record of being able to spot things early. If you look back at our careers, even pre-Muse, we've been spotting trends 5 to 10 years before they become mainstream for a while. And that includes things like Spotify, or even earlier than that. Sort of, I started my career in the CD business. So it's really thinking about the future consumer.
You're dating yourself here.
It's crazy. Most people don't even know what a CD is now. So it's really about putting our money behind that instinct. And with regards to that instinct, I think the fact that we're at the core of what we do is we're operators. And I think when you're an operator, you can tell if something, even if it's super early and it hasn't been defined yet, you can tell if this is something that will actually be able to come to life. And so much of that is based on the people. I always think that my greatest strength is actually in spotting talent. First of all, when I met Rachel, that is the number one epitome of me being able to spot talent. And that's 100% true. But I think we do it every day when we're spotting the talent that comes to us with great visionary ideas. And the ideas are one thing, but really what we're spotting is that particular talent going to be able to pull off this crazy idea?
Can they execute?
Can they execute? Can they operate? And as operators, we can pick up on those.
Yeah.
And for us, our specialty was always go to market, commercialization, business development in the early stages of startups, right? And so for us, we knew that our superpower or value add was going to really be able to help supercharge those companies at the earlier stages, because we'd been there before and we'd seen the kind of milestones that they had to hit to get a strong seed round, a strong A round.
What do you mean supercharge? I like that word. Let's.
When we talk about supercharging, Assia and I have a pretty powerful network of decision makers at Fortune 500s, athletes, sports teams, celebrities, influencers,
Tech entrepreneurs,
other tech entrepreneurs. And we knew how to do partnerships between them. We've worked with talent our entire careers, or if you wanted to get a strategic cap table, or you need help getting your first revenue generating partnership, that's what we mean by supercharge. We've been doing that as operators for 2 decades, and we know it's very valuable to the entrepreneurs. And so we decided to build our fund around that. That was our secret weapon.
Our litmus test of whether we've done our job properly is if our founders get a Series A raised with best-in-class investors. And in order to do that, they have to prove some very specific markers of commercial ability and growth and revenue. And so we will invest in these businesses and help them achieve those goals through different partnerships. And you want to give some examples of that? Or
I mean, everything from partnerships with like a Disney to a Coca-Cola to working with A-list talent, either as somebody that's going to help launch your product or going to invest in your product, major partnerships with other companies that will help you.
And since that is kind of your measure of success, like getting them to that stage, what percentage of companies in your portfolio have made it there so far?
Goodness me. Let me go back to the stats, but it's pretty high. It's got to be around 70% of the portfolio.
Yeah.
The others are probably just around the corner.
They're coming.
The nice thing about where we are now is, as you say, we invest in pre-seed. So we started our fund 7.5, 8 years ago now. So we're really going into that 7-year mark where companies are just really coming into themselves. And we are starting to see the results of our labor and the fruits of our labor and our founders' labor.
So you guys have positioned Muse as the fund that is willing to find and back overlooked founders, overlooked sectors. You guys are always betting on the underdog. Why are these people in these sectors so underlooked to begin with?
So when Assia and I first got into venture capital, our mission was to be one of the most helpful checks on the cap table. But what we very quickly realized was that when you move into the venture capital space, it's pretty broken. And broken in the sense that there are so many companies that should exist that don't exist, and that's because of a lack of funding.
Well, we know the horrible stat that only 2% of venture dollars go to female founders. And that's because the people they're pitching to are typically men, which is the largest majority of venture dollars and private equity dollars.
Only maybe 15% of women work in venture capital funds. And so when founders go to pitch with their women's health startup, for example, most of the people that they're pitching to don't understand it. And even worse, if there are women in the room, they don't necessarily have the decision-making power to write the check. So they might get an advocate in the room, but then that advocate has to then go and convince their all-male VC that this is a good opportunity. And so I think that understanding that money needs to flow into more female venture capitalists for this to change is a very important point, and a core reason as to why we decided to start our own fund. That makes sense.
Yes, we're very strong believers that unless the source of capital changes, we won't be able to create solutions for all as opposed to some. Then with regards to overlooked, you look at women's health, for example, and until 1993, women were excluded from clinical trials. I mean, that alone, and I keep having to repeat that to people going, 1993, I was 13. I mean, that is crazy. We don't have clinical trials of what Tylenol does to our bodies, of what antidepressants do to our bodies. I mean, and even the data since then is marred in bias. And the entire system is broken. So not just the venture capital side of where the money and the dollars are going, but also on the medical side of things, which you know very well, of course, Halle, because you're an expert in this field. So I would love to ask you, What has your experience been, and why did you start investing in women's health?
Yeah.
And how have you
Yeah.
seen the system being broken?
I've been a healthcare investor since 2010, and I like to call myself a healthcare optimist. Our healthcare system is very broken here, as you both know, and it is long overdue for a technological transformation that can help us lower costs and improve outcomes for Americans. And so within healthcare, I mean, healthcare is not an industry, it is thousands of industries and so many corners of healthcare that it's impossible to be an expert in everything. And so I've gotten in my time in healthcare pulled into specific subsectors of healthcare that have seemed like really great opportunities for me. So telehealth, I've spent a lot of time on, value-based care, I spent a lot of time on, and women's health, I spent a lot of time on by being a woman and having a body that is often broken and knowing that the care I've received could have been better. So that kind of has gotten me excited. I've invested in companies like Kindbody and Tia and Loom, Poppy Seed Health, also woman founded, which I think is really cool to see women being part of the solution to the problem that we face. But we're still so early and there's so much opportunity yet in women's health. I'm still very optimistic about it.
Well, we're excited to work with you. With regards to co-fertility, which is how we
Yeah.
met, I'd love to talk a little bit about how broken the fertility world is, but also, excitingly, speaking of the lack of venture funding in women's health, I believe co-fertility was one of the only startups that we've been involved with that has an all-female cap table.
We talked to more women investors than male investors, but it just so happened that like every male investor didn't get it. And so we ended up with an all-female cap table, which we now realize is kind of our superpower, and including one celebrity investor who we haven't announced yet, but Muse actually introduced us to. So that's super exciting that you guys were able to do that for us. But yeah, so I mean, co-fertility is, I'm a co-founder and chair. Lauren Mackler is our CEO, incredible human. Both of us have a deep interest in this space. I always say, like, one of my biggest regrets is not freezing my eggs earlier in life. It obviously wasn't a thing when Assia were old. I don't know how old you are, Rachel, but for those of us in our 40s, egg freezing wasn't a thing in our 20s. And so what we're really trying to do is reshape egg freezing to make it more accessible, more human, and community driven. And it was born out of the new reality that the way we build families today is more dynamic than ever. It looks different for everyone. And so if I can just plug it real quick and it'll tell the listeners what we're doing. We have two programs for women. We have a program we call Keep, which helps women freeze their eggs. We help them find a local clinic within our network. We use the discounts that we have to make the experience more affordable. And then we have a really unique program called the Split Program. And for those who qualify, they can freeze and store their eggs for free if they donate half of those eggs to a family that couldn't otherwise conceive, including couples with infertility, gay dads, cancer survivors, and more. And all of our members, whether they're keeping all the eggs or keeping half the eggs they retrieve, get access to our online community where our members kind of talk about what's happening, because the entire process can feel very lonely and isolating. So kind of building in that community aspect. And then everyone also has a member advocate. So someone on our team that's their point person to really hold their hand throughout the entire process.
We couldn't be more excited about co-fertility. You know that we actually stalked you guys. We have an ability to do that where when we like something and
I didn't know that.
We know when we need to get involved, we stalk you till you say yes to letting us
Convincing.
Yes, we are quite convincing.
Success. I'm so glad you did that. I'm so glad you guys did that.
And I'm glad that some of our intros and things are coming to fruition. And for us, we live to help companies like you do better and scale better, even though, quite frankly, you are a killer team.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's what we back. We back great founders. And we always say at Muse Capital, we invest in companies that should exist, and co-fertility should exist.
Yeah. Well, and I'd love to plug another company that you guys back that is started by one of my friends, Joanna Stober, in the menopause space. So maybe we can just plug Joanna and MIDI Health and what they're doing too.
When it comes to identifying the sectors within women's health that we care about. We like to be very proactive at Muse. So a lot of venture funds are very reactive in that they look to other funds for deal flow. But for us, every 3 months, we do deep dives on the women's health space. We try and identify the white space before it becomes a real thing. 5 years ago now, we saw menopause as a really big thing, I'd say, before everybody else. And we looked at a lot of the players in the sector, and we realized that there was this gaping hole for some kind of 360-degree virtual clinic that catered to women over 40. And we were looking for it. We couldn't really find it. And so we built a thesis around it. And then we went out to our network. And side note, I'm a Kaufman fellow. And so I actually went back to my Kaufman network. Sure enough, one of my dear friends, who's a very big but later stage healthcare investor, came back and said, "Hey, Rachel, I think there's this killer team. There's these 3 women in their 50s, and I think they've just been through menopause. It was a terrible experience, and they want to fix it." And that happened to be the MIDI team. And
Killer team, Silicon Valley.
yes, we
Serial
met
founders.
Joanna. What was amazing is because we'd done all of our research already, by the time we met, in terms of our process, we just knew that they had all the answers to the questions and had a very similar view. And back to our thing about ex-operators and knowing that they have the ability to execute, you could just see it. So we were very fortunate enough to be, I think, one of the very first checks into the pre-seed and led the pre-seed, and roll forward 5 years later. Well, they're really, really on a tear. I think last year they had a really incredible Series A led by Google Ventures, which was great to see.
And soon
there's going to be a very exciting announcement.
Which Joanna's actually joining us on a podcast to talk about that new announcement. But
in terms of MIDI and what they provide, if you look at the stats, there are many women in the world that are over 40 and experiencing problems and symptoms. And sadly, if you look at the way that the healthcare system is designed, OBs are typically trained for younger women, and specifically women that are creating babies, because that's where all of the money is. And so if you're a woman over 40, you're typically given subpar care, because a lot of the OBs are actually not trained in identifying menopause and menopausal symptoms. Yet we found stats that these women are spending up to $20,000 of their own money on their symptoms. That's outrageous. And that's also a multi-billion-dollar opportunity that has clearly had a lack of funding. And so when we looked at MIDI, we were like, we just knew. We were like, something has to exist. These guys are the team to do it. And we're really proud of Joanna and the team. I think they're also all-female cap table, which is amazing.
The guys are missing out, but that's their fault. That's their fault.
We're going to laugh all the way to the bank, right?
Yeah.
True.
You said Joanna's going to be in the podcast. What is your vision for this podcast? What can listeners expect?
Well, first of all, we were thinking we didn't want to do something that's an open-ended podcast. We wanted to do limited series on our sectors of expertise. So we're going to start with a limited series on the future of how we care. Then we're going to follow that with a limited series on the future of how we play. And then another limited series in the future of how we live. And yes, we will introduce you to some of our portfolio companies like Marina from Ellie Health, which is an incredible at-home hormone testing company. We're going to have MIDI, of course, talk about how do you increase performance and better the lives of women over 40. We will also have an athlete come on board and talk about how her level of performance on the field is influenced by different innovation. And we're hoping that people will learn a little bit more about venture capital in the space and how we approach it. And we're always big around trying to get more women in venture and more women making capital decisions. So hopefully through the lens of meeting our founders and seeing the solutions that they are building and hearing our approach will hopefully also inspire more women to come into our field.
Rachel, what are you excited about in this series?
I'm just excited about people just getting to know us as a fund, as investors, as women, and just kind of looking at the things that we care about, invest in, and back. I think, we hope it will be inspiring, if not from us, from our founders. And just to understand that there are these companies and entrepreneurs out there that are building for the solutions that both Assia and I never understood why they hadn't existed, and now we do. And we're hoping that we can change that going forward.
Okay, so as two European women now living in the United States, how do you guys view the opportunities in healthcare and just in the care economy overall compared to where you guys grew up and what you saw elsewhere?
I mean, I can talk to that. I'm from the UK originally. The healthcare system is very, very different. And honestly, for me as a personal experience going through motherhood, and I actually just had my second baby girl 5 months ago. I also have a 4-year-old son. The utter ignorance that I had going into that process, thinking, oh, well, I'm in America and I have great insurance. And surely because I have great insurance, I will get great care. Going through that process myself was mind-blowing in the worst way, because when you're at home in the UK, when you give birth, first of all, you have mandatory maternity leave. I think it's 6 months now in the UK. In other European countries like Sweden, it's a year and up to 2 years for both.
Paid by the government, not paid by the employer.
Exactly. And also in the UK, when you give birth, you're sent home and a midwife will come and help you, like explain how to breastfeed. I was literally rolled out of the hospital here with hardly any care. When I asked for a lactation consultant, they said, oh, they didn't do that anymore. This is one of the best hospitals in LA. And I ended up going home and really hurting myself. Like I didn't know how to breastfeed. I ended up developing a breast infection, almost got sepsis. And it was actually one of our companies that we invested in that stopped me from ending up in hospital. Because they were a telehealth platform for postpartum services that hilariously, she had pitched us before I had my baby. I think I was 8 months pregnant. And I did say, oh, surely you get this. I went through it, realized I didn't get it. And even worse, it affected my health in a really dangerous way. And the pediatrics office gave me the card to her service and said, hey, you're struggling with this. Here, take this. And that was Mummy. And they ended up coming in, diagnosing me properly, stopping me from going to hospital, allowing me to continue breastfeeding my son. And I was like, how on earth is my experience? And if I had this experience with great healthcare, what does that mean for others that just don't? And so I ended up actually stalking the founder again. She'd already closed her round. I'm a very good, Assia will say I'm the most graceful stalker that you will meet. But yeah, I was adamant that I needed to be part of the round and part of the journey. And
in Europe, you would have had more support. In Sweden, you would have had more support. In the UK, you would have had more support. Here, you have to build it. I'm always in shock in America that America is the worst first world country to be poor in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So part of what we try to build in the companies we invest in is democratizing the care. And
actually on that, like a Mummy is very conscious to also offer services to the Medicaid population. In fact, they did a very big deal with a healthcare system that just looks at Medicaid patients, which is incredible. And so, yeah, the democratization of care with technology is a real passion point for us.
It's such a missed opportunity. You have Europe doing so well and providing so much care for its population, and yet the center of innovation is in this country. And the discrepancy of those two things is really quite jarring. But it's why we're venture capitalists in this country. It's about building solutions here that will have a much greater impact. What do you think? Since you are a proud Italian. Well, what are
Well, Italians have the second best healthcare system, I think, just right behind Spain, or health outcomes, I should say. So they're doing something right. I'll tell you what they're not doing right is smoking. Just always shocked at how many people smoke in Italy. Yet despite that, they live way longer than us Americans. So yeah, something about the food, the walking, the lower stress levels, all those things that we don't really have here in the US. So
yeah, I mean, food is a big one. And, we could talk a whole hour on that. And hopefully we'll have someone on the podcast coming in to talk about how food affects and our gut affects our wellness outcomes. But yeah, I mean, in Europe, the food you're eating doesn't have the same kind of sugar content. And even the pasta that you have here, even imported pasta from Italy that you have here is not imported. It's actually injected. What do they call it? It's like enhanced is what they put on the box, right? So everything that comes into the States is just enhanced with sugar and chemicals and things that shouldn't exist. And that definitely...
What? Dry pasta has sugar in it?
You know what? This is actually, I don't know what brand you use, but you only since you're Italian also and you like to cook your pasta, you should really only buy pasta that's artisanal. So you want to get Garofalo pasta, Rummo pasta. Those are ones that are not enhanced. I'm telling you, we could have a whole hour.
Yeah. Food is medicine.
It's
definitely a worthy topic. Food is expensive here, and we don't invest in preventive health, and we don't set people up for success in that way. So we have a sick care system that we have to deal with the chronic diseases that so many people have because of what they eat and the sedentary lifestyle. So there's a lot of money to be made treating things, but really where we should be spending our money and where we should be investing is preventing these things to begin with.
And that's where venture capitalists like us and investors like because we need to change the face of venture capital to invest in businesses that should exist and make the world look and feel like it should.
Yeah. Yep. You guys are always talking about conscious capitalism. Can you share a little more with our listeners what you mean by that?
I mean, fundamentally, conscious capitalism is investing in good versus greed.
I think from my perspective, I think the face of venture capital has been extremely negative in terms of its reputation because of the greed culture and the bro culture. And I think we're here to show that capital can be and should be used for good and hopefully create a new face of venture capital, which we're all very proud of.
Yeah, and people sometimes think that conscious capitalism is impact, but it's less about impact investing and it's more about investing with impact.
What do you mean by evolving consumer?
I believe that in the next 50 years, I think over 50% of the population in the USA will be diverse, and that diverse audience are going to need services and products that are suited to their needs. Combine that with the fact that most of the decisions around household spending are made by women and continue to be. These are just two trends that are shaping the evolving consumer and trends that we want to focus on at Muse.
The only thing I would add to that is the transfer of wealth is more and more going into the hands of women who are inheriting capital and are at the helm of family offices. And they need to be educated in order to know where to make investments and not just give that decision-making power to their male CIO, because they might think that they are ill-equipped to be able to make those decisions. And yet we always say to all of our female friends, especially those holding the power of capital in family offices, that they can and should make those decisions.
And not just for charity either. I think, traditionally, because there's been a lack of education around women and investing, that most of this wealth gets given to charity, which is great, but there is also the opportunity to educate women on the fact that you can put your dollars to work and you can invest in companies that don't just do good for the world, but can actually return serious capital.
Yeah, for example, if you are interested in maternal health, instead of giving money to charity, which a lot of us women do, what if a portion of that charitable contribution goes into for-profit businesses that are addressing companies in the maternal healthcare space? Then not only are you investing with impact in that you're creating solutions, but you're also able to track that investment going into founders. Those founders themselves will continue to grow their own wealth and contribute themselves to paying it forward and investing themselves in other future businesses, and you can really track where that capital is going.
Assia, Rachel, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited for this podcast, and I'm just honored that you included me on the very first one.
Thank you for taking the time and for interviewing us. Thank you for investing in what you do, co-investing with us, and being a dear friend.
Thank you, Halle.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to check out our show notes, and to find out more about Halle, go to halletecco.com, and do not forget to check out her podcast, Heart of Healthcare. As always, you can find out more about us at musecapital.vc. Tune in to the next episode where we speak to Joanna Strober, the inspiring and preeminent CEO of MIDI Health, and we get to learn about why menopause is hot. Special thanks to our executive producer, Lauren Maddock, and our engineer and composer, John Meek. Ciao for now.